Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Amber Artrip, and I am the Vice President of Marketing here at EnergyCAP. So thank you all for tuning in. Today's topic is on utility data, the foundation for sustainability reporting. We have over 350 folks on the line for today's presentation, and we've put together some really great content for you. We'll get to a couple housekeeping items and then we'll roll right into today's presentation. The webinar will be recorded and we will send an email with a link to the recording to all registrants within 24 hours. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom screen to submit your questions. We will get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation, but if we don't get to your question, don't worry. We will have a team member follow up with you and get in touch. At this time, I'd like to pass it off to John Heinz, the Chief Sales Officer at EnergyCAP, to roll into today's presentation. John?
Great, thank you, Amber. I am very excited to present today. This is a topic that is really near and dear to me because of my role over the last 15 plus years, is just how utility data is very important and how it's the foundation really for any activity that you're doing regarding energy and sustainability. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So the agenda today, we're going to talk about industry trends and really this new concept that's focused on emissions reduction. And over time, it's been looked at in our industry, in our space, as cost reduction activities, but that's now shifting to emissions reduction. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about why utility bills are foundational. We're going to talk about streamlining utility bill data and getting access to the data, best practices for reporting, and hopefully we'll have enough time I can provide a demonstration, just a mini tidbit of what EnergyCAP can provide and the tool set that our clients are using for carbon reporting and for tracking utility data. And then at the very end, we'll dive into Q&A. So if you do have questions, feel free to type them into the box and we'll see what we can get to with the time remaining. So a company called TechNavio released a report that says, really with the growing emphasis on government initiatives and regulations, that the carbon accounting software market is expected to increase by $6.38 billion by 2025. So we're almost halfway there already. But what was interesting to me about that is being in the utility bill accounting software space for a long time, I didn't even realize that a carbon accounting software existed. So that was first news to me, but then I started to think about it more and it was really interesting, is that if you are tracking utilities and you're doing any type of utility cost accounting, then you really are doing carbon accounting. It's just a different focus. So what we're really seeing emerge is an increase in government initiatives and legislation that are leading to a higher emphasis and focus on carbon tracking and tracking your emissions rather than, say, use and cost tracking and reporting. So that's just a shift in the mindset and how you're looking at things. It's fundamentally a lot of the same kind of data, but it's just a shift in what you're looking at. The perceived biggest market challenge going forward is obtaining the data. And so has historically been a challenge. That's why we've been a company and been in existence for over 40 years, is because getting utility data is very challenging. It's not easy, it is difficult, but then it's also the foundation for which all of your initiatives should be based on. So something that was specifically in this report that really kind of sparked the idea of this webinar, I'd like to read it just so you can understand this. So collecting the data on energy use is the most critical part of any report on environmental sustainability. Most organizations rarely track their energy usage, which to me, that should not be the case, but unfortunately it is. Additionally, at times, the information related to energy is tracked on the basis of cost, but not at the usage level. Why is that? It's because a lot of organizations are tracking cost in their financial systems, they're paying utility bills, but they're not focusing as much as they should be on the consumption. The calculation of carbon emissions in any given year involves tracking down utility invoices for hundreds of buildings and contacting multiple energy managers to ascertain the use of propane, gas, and other energy sources. So the emphasis here being access to data is very important. And a lot of organizations are just tracking one element to that data, and that would be cost. So we look at really your focus needs to be holistically on the utility data on both use and cost, because the use is really what's foundational to all of your sustainability and energy management initiatives. When creating a sustainability plan, what are factors that you should look at? Sustainability, just the concept of that is really a broad general term that can mean so many things to so many different people. You can see in this pie chart here, sustainability, there's a lot of different slices of the pie and factors that go into sustainability reporting, some of which some of you might not even realize go into sustainability plans for other organizations. Things such as purchased goods and services and transportation, some of those areas, that is, part of a total organization sustainability plan. But are all of these things equal? So really, utility bill data is key to reducing your footprint. We know that 40% of global carbon emissions come from the built environment, so basically buildings, and the largest, and they really are the largest opportunity for carbon reduction. So if that's the case, then when you look at that total pie of all the factors that can go into a sustainability plan, managing your building energy consumption is a large chunk of that. It can be up to 40% of that total pie. So it's a very important piece. Now, why are we focusing on utility bill data, and why not just other sources of data? Well, basically, the foundation of energy and water data, it's very easy to get, it's obtainable, it's easy to measure, it's readily available. In fact, if you're listening to this, chances are you already today receive energy and utility bills and water bills for all of the buildings that you're managing, even your house, or the place that you're renting. So that data is so easy to get and easy to track that it becomes the easiest thing the foundation and the easiest place to start. Some of the other data that's involved, not to say it's not valuable, it's just harder to get, and it's also harder to measure. So consider that when you're looking at a sustainability plan and focusing on efforts, what's the easiest data and the low-hanging fruit to start with? And we always look at that as being utility bills. So if you decide to centralize on utility bill data, let's talk about best practices for doing so. So our purpose as a company is to help you manage your finite resources to make a more sustainable world. And the way we do that is creating technology-based solutions to help you track your energy and sustainability data so you can manage consumption and therefore reduce your carbon and drive savings. So really one of the first steps is you need to have a system in place. Now, being the company we are, we're going to recommend using EnergyCAP. EnergyCAP's best in class at this, but just having something, even if it's as simple as Excel, is at least a foundation to start from. So one of your first steps needs to be the data capture. So how are you going to get utility bill data so you can use it for all of your reporting and analysis? So there's a lot of options that are available for processing and entering bills. So one of the ways is just the old-fashioned manual entry. Get a bill, enter it into your system, and then you can use the data from there. A lot of bill data is available these days in various formats. Most of you have probably heard of Green Button. That was an initiative that was designed so you can get data in workable Excel and flat file formats. That's available through a lot of utility companies. Pros and cons with the Green Button data, but that was why that exists today. That utility companies need to provide data in a flat file in a workable format. So that's another option. So getting that data removes the hassle of receiving and manually keying bills. And then a third way is through various technologies to take images or paper bills or complex formats like EDI, transform them into digital formats, and then enter those into a system. So a lot of different ways to capture and process utility bill data. And really the whole workflow of getting bills and processing them, the goal of it is to enter accurate bill data timely and efficiently, so then it can be the foundation on everything else that you're doing. So the actual collection and entry of bill data becomes very strategic and key in what you're doing. So I offer 5 steps that you should walk through when considering how you should receive bills, enter them, and what the workflow should look like. So the first one is determining acquisition methods. And what I mean by that is, how are you going to receive the bills to process them? Some organizations have some level of restrictions in receiving bills in certain ways. And so you need to look at the various options that are available, both from your utility companies, but then also internally. For instance, EDI is an electronic format that utility companies provide. If you move to EDI, then they turn off paper bills. If your accounting team, for some reason, based on their practices, needs paper bills, well, that acquisition method is not going to be right for your organization. So it's helpful to determine the ways to get utility bills. Next is finalize bill formats. So what are the formats available from the utility companies, and what can you process? Obviously there's going to be different ways to process different formats of bills. So you need to understand what formats are available from your utility companies or from internal stakeholders, and then formalize on what those formats are. Thirdly, establish workflows for auditing bills and handling exceptions, and in some cases handling approvals of bill data. So this is important, that once bill data is actually entered, you have some level of workflow established to check data, make sure it's valid, and then a team that's handling any type of follow-ups to exceptions that might fall out of the process of bill entry. A lot of organizations also have approval steps to make sure that once data hits the system, that approvals are in place to ensure that all the data then that's flowing through is accurate and can be reported on. And number 4 is, once you have now good data in the system, you configure reports to handle communication among stakeholders. You have alerts and notifications set up to alert team members that bills are in and it's their turn now to take action. It's also helpful to have any type of flagging or notation system to keep track of all the activities that are going on within the workflow of your utility bills. And then lastly is to, once you go through all of those steps, is to consider, do you have the internal resources to manage all of this and manage it well? And is it sustainable going forward? Just because you can do something, short term doesn't mean it's sustainable and it's a good practice and good steps. So you might want to consider, do you need to outsource any of these pieces? So that, there's a lot of companies today that offer various outsourcing functions to help you with all this process. We have a process we call bill capture that really takes all the burden and pain off of processing your utility bills and figuring out formats and all of those kind of steps, and just does it for you. So that's just an example of if internally, you have some limited resources or some constraints, you might consider outsourcing some of this. The reason I mention that is that bill data is the foundation for all of your reporting. So if not done accurately and timely, then you're going to run into reporting problems. So it's certainly something that you need to consider and not take lightly. It's also important to have audits and verifications built into your process. So whatever your process is, make sure you're validating data. Garbage in, garbage out. If you're not, your bill data has a lot of errors, you're missing bills, you just have problems, then whatever you're reporting on the back end is going to be problematic. So you need to ensure that that process, you have these checks and balances in place to ensure good data. If your system has auditing capabilities, that's really great first place to start. Ensure that audits are turned on and configured in a way that meets the needs of your organization. It's also helpful to have workflow steps built in to assign problems to team members so they can follow up and you can follow the paper trail of all the activities. It's also important to be able to manage challenging scenarios. And what do I mean by that? Well, utility bill reporting is not that simple. We've come to conclude that over decades of doing this, that it would be great if it really were as simple as here's my use and cost and let's go report. What ends up happening is the way that your utility accounts are structured and the fact that there's deregulation today makes everything just a bit more complicated. So case in point, from a financial side, from the accounting side, accountants like to make their lives a lot easier. So there's the concept of summary accounts, where your utility company has one account that serves many different service points. From an accounting standpoint, that's great because the accounting group can write one check. Here you go. This covers this one account, and we're good to go. From an energy management standpoint, it's not that easy because you have this issue where you have one account with multiple points of service. So you need to be able to tie those together appropriately and then allocate the costs out proportionately to each one of the meters or the points of service you're being billed for. So you need the proper tools to be able to handle those complex scenarios. Additionally, you might have one point of service into your building, like an electric service. Then you have multiple vendors. That would apply if you have a deregulated scenario, if you're living in a deregulated market, where you have one utility company that is the distribution company and one that's the supply. So effectively, you're getting two bills for the one point of service in your building. That causes all types of headaches of keeping track of your use and costs because you're getting essentially double billed. So you got to figure out what portions of your bill you need to count for usage reporting and which pieces you need to count for cost reporting. That becomes a challenge. So you got to make sure you can handle those types of scenarios. You also might consider going beyond utility data. So what all is part of your sustainability plan? Well, what we tend to find is there's the energy portion, which at least a lot of our clients are tracking very well. Electric, gas, oil, steam, commodities like that, like the main commodities that you're getting billed for that would generally make up the large proportion of your utility spend. Then there's this whole other side that you can track. In fact, there's a lot of clients on this call, and I bet a lot of you didn't even realize that you could track everything that's on this list. So if your sustainability plan involves tracking refuse and recycling and other types of sub points under there, then you need to be able to track that appropriately. Water is a big piece of the reporting bucket. And it might not be just reporting on water, but all the subcategories of water you're getting billed for: fire protection, irrigation, sewer, well water, things like that. So, you got to look at, when you're tracking the bill data, do you parse out all of those individual commodities, within water? And then kind of the last side of this is all the other pieces of utility and energy that would impact your greenhouse gas emissions and your carbon reporting. Things like fleet tracking, miles driven or flown for your employees or your fleets. Do you have solar arrays, and are you, do you have any types of net metering scenarios or anything along those lines? What types of purchases are you making? So those are all considerations when you're starting to compile all this data. How do you track it? How do you put it together? Put it in a system so then you can start reporting out. And a lot of these also have a GHG emissions factor, to them. So if you're purchasing renewables, well, those GHG factors, your greenhouse gas factors, are going to be different than if you're purchasing, say, coal, electricity. So all these are factors, when you're tracking all of the commodities. You got to make sure that everything's set up and applied appropriately so you can do accurate reporting. So what happens if you don't get a utility bill? Or maybe put differently, what happens if you have data that's in addition to a utility bill? What do you do with that? Most common these days is interval data. So any type of smart meter that you have installed, whether it be from your utility company or a sub-metering system, or sensors, or whatever it is, interval data is becoming very dependent upon. It's becoming more readily available. And so there's a lot of different ways to get interval data. But what doesn't, some of the value streams of interval data, besides like the fact sometimes it's difficult to get, because if you don't have your own sub-metering system, it can be challenging to get the data. But once you have it, it is incredibly valuable, because a utility bill is only a snapshot of roughly every 30 days. Interval data lets you really look at the heartbeat of the building. So what's happening, every 15 minutes or hourly within the building. Very important for energy management and sustainability initiatives. It's really helpful to have both sides of this, the utility bill data and then also the interval data. For a lot of our clients, they even take the interval data and then roll that into a monthly total for use and cost allocation purposes. So they have a sub-meter installed and then run a process to take the monthly total of the interval data, apply a rate, and then they have a monthly use and cost total. So you can do a lot more with interval data if you have it. The other side to this is what we call time series data. So it's really any factor that you might want to throw into the reporting mix that is valuable in what you're doing and how you operate as a business. So case in point, if I'm an industrial plant and I'm producing widgets, every hour, every day within my factory, I might want to correlate my units of production to my consumption and cost, and therefore also my GHG. So I could get a metric ton of CO2, per widget produced. Something along those lines. So keeping track of any time series data, it can be occupancy, miles driven or miles flown, hours of operation, production, room nights in hotels, things like that. Those are also factors that you might want to consider into the data mix of tracking towards your sustainability plan. So that's a bit about the data itself. So let's transition into best practices for reporting. One of the simplest ways to start reporting is getting and building snapshots of data for really any level that you need to report on. Within our system, we call these power views. Power views are very simple, easy to access views of your data. So click on an object, get some summary details about that object. So that's very strategic. And if you're building even any types of views and tools that you have, consider doing these kinds of things. It's really helpful when you can just drill into an object and get some summary details very quickly. So some of the views, you would want to consider profile views, so trending over time, month to month, year to year, different forms, line charts, bar charts, comparisons. I want to compare, this month, this year to last month, same year. Or I'm sorry, I said that. This month, this year to last year, same month. Also consider doing things like EUI trending, so trending of normalized use per area over time. So all those kind of views are very helpful. Again, snapshots, getting info very quickly to see performance at any object. The other recommended best practice is to standardize on reports. So whatever your reports are going to be, get buy-in from stakeholders, get buy-in from your community that's helping you, day to day and encouraging you to perform. And then standardize on these reports so you can then use them to track performance month to month. There's some reports, at least in our system, that we've built in. We have a guide that basically says, here are really strongly recommended energy management and sustainability reports to help you communicate performance in various ways. And part of standardizing on reports is also listing why they're used, how to filter them, what's important about them. So communicating out to your stakeholders is also very important, not just sending them reports. If you get a report in your inbox, you might look at it and say, okay, great. What's the value of this to me? What does it mean to me? So providing some content to your stakeholders would also be very beneficial so they understand what they're looking at and why it's important and why you're sending it to them. So another staple in the best practices community is dashboarding. Dashboarding is such a common practice these days where you have all this data and you need to serve it up in various ways that are meaningful to you and your stakeholders. So you need to be able to create quick snapshot views of data that you can standardize on. These are different than power views. Power views would be go to an object and look at some quick summaries. Dashboards are telling a larger picture story. A dashboard is designed to say, for whatever view you want to look at, portfolio view, one building view, one region view, one business unit view, a job function view, whatever it is, here's how we're performing based on that. And performance can be measured in a lot of different ways. So keep that in mind as you're building out, some tools to communicate. When you create dashboards, think of your audience and think of the views that they would want to look at. Along the lines of dashboarding is the ability to make your dashboards public. So having dashboards within a closed system, yeah, that's good. You're partway there, but then there's the ability to say, let's create some dashboards and share them to a community, that goes beyond, say, just the users that can log into a system or just your business unit. So in our system, we provide some tools to embed the dashboards you create onto various websites. The example here on the screen is for the University of Nebraska. They embed dashboards onto their sustainability pages on their website. The value of that being their energy management team and their sustainability team, they're not web developers. They don't, their strength isn't going to the website and just building whatever and having it populated. What they want to do is manage the data within the system and manage views within the system, but then have the mechanism to communicate that out to the public. So providing iframe links that you can then give to a webmaster that they can put on your website is a very easy way that allows you to control the dashboards within the system, but then any changes you make, they display within that iframe on a website. So consider that while you're building out your strategy and the ways you're going to communicate performance. Doing it this way is really nice because it's sustainable, where you can manage the data and then it just populates for the public to view. And by the way, this is a very real live site. So we have a URL here on the slide. So feel free to go to Nebraska's website and check out all of their data. They have a mix of benchmark data, of interval meter data, of bill data. They have a lot mixed onto their website. And it's all coming from EnergyCAP. So the next question we tend to get is, hey, all of the canned functionality is great. Okay, so we sell and support a canned piece of software. Well, there's only so much we can create and support until we get, a user that says, hey, the way I envision my data is a very particular way. Customization is really, really common these days. And I would expect almost everyone on the call to be in that camp where you're looking at data the way you want to visualize it and look at it is much different than the way I want to look at it and the next person, because we all think differently. So we get it. We understand, dashboards and reports and power views, they're great things to standardize on, but that doesn't mean that they solve every problem. So what we built into our application is a framework that allows you to do custom reporting using industry standard business intelligence tools. So for those of you that don't know really what business intelligence tools are, let me just kind of enlighten you. There's been a growing trend over the last number of years for the very need to customize data. So there's now these really complex but can be more simplistic business intelligence tools to let you frame data and report on data in a lot of different ways. Excel is one of the first BI tools that really almost ever existed that lets you put data into a spreadsheet and then visualize it using pivot charts and graphs and things like that. Today, those tools are really like now on steroids. Some of the common ones are Microsoft Power BI and Tableau. Cognos is another one. These tools tend to be more standard within organizations when you need to take data from a lot of different systems, put that data together, and then create views of data, could be dashboards or reports, to analyze that data. So it allows you to create and view data your way, the way you want to see it. The challenge with using these tools is getting access to the data. So the way things used to be years ago was you have your data in a system, you export it to Excel, and then you import that into it, keep it in Excel or put it into another system, and it becomes a manual process that's labor intensive. We don't want to support those. We don't want to build those and deliver those to any of you. So in today's world, there's APIs that help you interact with the database, of systems, and you can use these APIs then to extract data to perform various functions and for various purposes. So what we've built around our system is the ability to take data within the EnergyCAP database, put it into a very nice indexed dictionary view of your data, of which then you can connect that to your favorite BI tool. So you can connect that to Excel, to Tableau, to BI, to Cognos, really just any of the tools that are out there. That makes it very nice, very easy to connect the data that you're tracking, all of your utility bill data and your energy and sustainability data that would be in EnergyCAP, connect that to these other systems. So I mentioned this, I realize not everyone's using EnergyCAP, but having the tool set to interact with the database that you are using to track your data and connect to these custom reporting tools and these BI tools is a very important kind of next wave feature set that you should explore. So that way you can do things like this. So this was a view of data that one of our clients said, hey, we want to do some different things with our carbon data, and we want to track carbon differently than what you had within EnergyCAP. We have Power BI. So how do we make that happen? And we said, here's a link, enjoy. Connect Power BI to the database and off they go. And so here's a view, of different types of, views of their carbon data. So that's just an example of how, you kind of take this need to customize and take a tool set with available, that's available in the technology to solve a problem really quickly and get something out there. So this is just the type of view of, what you can build with a Power BI or Tableau, system. Just staying on the topic of carbon reporting, that tends to be really the focus these days. That's where we started with, where for years we were this cost accounting solution, and not to say that we're not, we still are. You can track savings and manage all your utility costs within our software, but now the focus is shifting towards carbon accounting and carbon reduction. So the foundation of carbon reporting is you need to track your consumption and then apply factors. And now you have your carbon footprint, and then you need the tools to be able to manage it from there. Again, kind of overemphasizing the fact you got to have your utility data. That's really the foundation. But then you can get views like this, where you can look at your year-to-year total metric tons of CO2. You can track a target and track how you're trending compared to target. With all of these government mandates and legislation that are out there, this becomes really important to say, what is my reduction target? Maybe you have a mandate, maybe you don't, but you can at least trend towards a goal of some sort, and then see how you're performing, and then see all the, greenhouse gas mix, what's all part of the mix for your metric tons of CO2 reporting. And then, we're talking about the best practices for reporting, but there's also best practices for, just holistically looking at all of your data. So the first, best practice is look at automating processes whenever possible. I touched on that earlier. You really got to work on, how do you build data? How do you get the data? How do you process it accurately and timely? And then, how do you audit it and make sure that it's valid? All of those steps can actually be automated these days. And so that'll save you a ton of time, a ton of headache, ton of effort if you can automate that. You can also automate the distribution of reports and the handing off of dashboards. So whatever you can do to automate, I'd encourage you to consider, because time is expensive. And, especially in today's world where, we've seen just a lot of our clients say, hey, we have some labor shortages or we have some issues. Whenever you can automate processes and take out manual steps, it's really, really valuable. Stay organized and set priorities, right? You need to stay focused. You need to make sure that your data is indexed, organized. It's easy to understand. Stakeholders understand it. If it's not, and data's all over the place, that's going to be challenging for everyone and challenging to report on. And also setting priorities and goals. What should we focus on now, and what are we marching towards? Really valuable, as part of your strategy. You need to be able to communicate with stakeholders and communicate, again, challenging world. A lot of you are probably still working from home. That becomes challenging just to talk to someone, let alone really communicate performance and where you are. So communication should be What reports are we standardizing on? Are we pushing out reports to stakeholders? Are we pushing out notifications? Hopefully, a lot of that's also automated so you can communicate and automate at the same time. You need to build a team. You really shouldn't stand alone on an island. So you need to build a team to encourage you and help you with what you're doing. They need to hold you accountable. You need to hold them accountable. You need to get support. So building a team is going to make you successful in what you're doing. You got to develop KPIs, so key performance indicators. Those are really strategic. You can develop those, hopefully put them into dashboards, put them into these Power BI tools that I talked about, but make sure that you're tracking and trending towards something that's important for you. You got to celebrate your success. Have a beer with your cohorts every once in a while. You got to communicate this out. You got to celebrate it. So whenever you do something successful, go to social media, celebrate it. Go to others, go to stakeholders, go to others that in your organization that aren't stakeholders. Just make sure you're communicating the successes that you're experiencing and what you're doing. And then lastly is to network. So if internally you're doing all these things, it's still valuable to network with others, see how others are performing, tips and tricks that they're doing, and then carry that forward to your organization. Networking is very strategic. Go to conferences, go to join AEE or APA or some of those types of organization, or IDEA. There's a lot of good organizations today that they're now getting back to regular conferences, in-person conferences, and still doing part of them remote. So get involved and network. This is going to be a bit of a shameless plug for networking, but I do want to invite all of you for a networking event. We have an upcoming regional training conference in Orlando. This is how we allow users to be connected and to network with us as a company and our professionals, but then also with each other. So we host events, and we have one coming up in April in Orlando. So if you're interested, please check out energycap.com/events. And if you can't make this one, we will host more of these events so you can network with peers and stay connected. Okay. Before we get into a Q&A, I wanted to go through a couple screens within EnergyCAP. So let me go ahead and do that. And I'm going to switch screens here. Okay. Before I get into EnergyCAP, I wanted to show you a couple examples of what some of our clients are doing with the data that they're tracking within EnergyCAP. And I think it's really important because it helps communicate what is possible and what they are doing. I also like to celebrate clients, and I think it's important. So one of the largest cities in the US is the city of Philadelphia. The city of Philadelphia has an office of sustainability, and within that office is the energy office. So really, the energy office kind of wears two hats, energy and sustainability. And they have a whole website dedicated to the programs that they're working on, both internally, but then also throughout the city. If I scroll down to this page here, they have a link to their dashboard, which tracks the progress towards their climate goals. This is one of these dashboards that they maintain and manage within EnergyCAP. So if Dom, their main user, makes a change, it would just update here right on their website. So here they talk about their GHG reduction strategy for 2030, their energy use reduction strategy, and a lot of the other initiatives that they're undertaking, with hyperlinks back to their website to further communicate their goals and their programs. They track their performance compared to their goal. They're tracking a total energy use intensity, so normalized use per area for all buildings across the city. So, something that's noteworthy here is they've been reducing their energy use per area month over month for the last couple years. So really, I tip my cap to them. They're doing an outstanding job managing their energy and reducing their footprint. They have some use trends that they make available. They're tracking, what commodity, total MMBTU for each commodity, and then which departments are using the most. Prisons is the highest. That's really not that unexpected because prisons are high volume buildings, open 24/7, They just have high loads. So maybe to be expected. And then they break it down, energy users by building. And then they also in Philadelphia have Energy Star submittal requirements where every building that's over a certain size has to submit to portfolio manager. That's a really common legislation these days. And so you can see a lot of the buildings that they've submitted and their scores. So that's one example. That's the city of Philly. Another quick example is a college. It's Montgomery College. So they have a energy conservation and sustainability group where they're working on conservation and sustainability initiatives, and they want to communicate their performance and show data to stakeholders and to students and teachers. So they, on their website, again, embedding various views of data so stakeholders can come here and just look at data. So some of these are benchmark views and trend views, their carbon footprint, year over year, again, EUI for them and some of their expensive buildings. A third example is a school district. So this is Fairfax County Public Schools. Fairfax is one of the largest school districts in the country. So they provide a district overview of data where, again, students and faculty and staff and the general public can come and look at all of their initiatives and then look at their performance. So cost trending year to year, use trending in total BTUs, their carbon footprint. Interesting for a lot of schools, you'll see a huge dip in 2020. You would probably recognize that for a lot of organizations, but as schools were shut down, that's why there's a large dip. In some cases, you might say, well, maybe that should be a little more, but I have no idea. I'd want to drill into the data a little bit more to look at that. And I also have no idea, if the schools were shut down. But that's a clear indicator of, something looks, a little off. But we all really know what that can be attributed to. And then a lot of other views. They also submit the Energy Star and benchmark various buildings. The last client example I wanted to show, let me take a step back here, was the state of Connecticut. The state of Connecticut has a greener government department that manages all of their state programs and their use and GHG emission reduction plans. So their website, provides a lot of different tips and reports to the general public, but they also have a dashboard. What's unique about this dashboard is they are using Tableau to populate this dashboard, and they're bringing data from EnergyCAP into Tableau. Now, why are they doing that? They're doing it because they're tracking some vehicles and some other commodities outside of what they're tracking within EnergyCAP. So this is an example of them taking the data that they're tracking within a database and mashing it with other data and putting it together within Tableau. So a nice, real quick summary view here on their website. Okay, so quickly within EnergyCAP, I wanted to just give a very quick snapshot of some of the capabilities so you can understand this. So at the heart of what EnergyCAP is tracking is utility bill data. So we've covered that. That data then transforms into views and various ways to look at data. Okay. So some of the ways you can look at data, you can summarize it based on departments or buildings. But what EnergyCAP's looking at is cost and use details. It breaks all of your use and cost down by commodity. What these lines represent on numerous charts is your target. So if you have a reduction target in cost, use, or greenhouse gas, you can track how you're performing compared to target. So you can get a lot of different ways to look at the data. You can track your greenhouse gas emission. This is for City Hall. So how that's tracking year over year and then compared to a target. EnergyCAP's tracking savings details. So in addition to your use and cost, you can also track savings and calculate, well, due to my energy management and sustainability initiatives, what am I actually saving? So this can be represented in cost savings. So year to year, what are my savings? But then also, what am I avoiding using? So in this case, for electricity, what's my cost savings year to year, but also what am I like not using? What are my savings from a use standpoint, which is also very important. This can be translated to my carbon savings, if you wanted to take it to that level. So EnergyCAP's also interfacing with portfolio manager. So a part of a lot of sustainability plans are submitting buildings to portfolio manager. So we have a direct connection to portfolio manager. And once you submit, it'll return ratings for rateable buildings. If your building's not rateable, then it'll at least return your EUI and some other metrics and post to your portfolio manager account. So really a good benchmark to see how you're performing compared to the Energy Star standards. I mentioned in my slides about accuracy of data. Well, that's really important. So as bills are flowing into the system, flags get created on bills that fail various audits. So as data is being populated, if the system detects problems with the bills that are coming in, it'll create a flag and assign it to a bill. So this is a look at a electric meter. You can see here, plenty of bills were entered, and then there's a red flag. This indicates a problem. If I go into this bill, I can see what the problem is. So the first problem says gap of 1 or more days between this bill and the preceding bill. What this is saying is this was, a mid-June to mid-July bill, and the last bill entered was mid-April to mid-May. So I'm missing a mid-May to mid-June bill. I'm missing my May bill. And that's a problem. Why? Well, this bill isn't necessarily the problem, but there is a problem because we don't have last month's bill. So think about this. If you're going to report on the electric consumption for 2021 for this meter, we're missing May. So naturally, my use and cost is going to be lower than prior years. So that is a major problem. Plus, if you're connecting with your accounting system using this as a payment stream, you didn't pay that bill. So you want to look into that. So, problems are checking that, just making sure like, okay, from each month, each pay period, do I have a bill? And then the other problem it's looking at is abnormal demand. So abnormal demand would mean that the demand is off. And in this case, it's higher, it's 42% higher than other demand charges. Now, why is that important? Well, first off, it's saying my load is real high, so that's potentially a problem within the building. The other, and this is more from a cost standpoint, is if my demand is this high, that might set my demand rate for the year. So, depending what rate they're on, that could be, a cost driver within the building. So it's just a good indicator to say something's wrong. So let's take a look. How that translates visually is if I go to a monthly comparison tab, you can see I'm missing a whole month. So that's a problem. So that's really what's valuable about those checks. So if you have good data and you're ready to report, let's talk real quickly about reporting. Any system that you have should have a large list of reports that you can run. So some looks at the reports within EnergyCAP. There's trending, so year to year, month to month trending reports. This one in particular, I filtered it to say, let's look at my metric tons of CO2 building by building. So this is a look at a building, and I can see in 2021, my profile is a little bit down compared to prior years. So excellent. So this building looks like it's trending, pretty well from a carbon reduction standpoint. These reports you could filter and say, I want to look at cost per month or use per area per month. In this case, I'm looking at carbon. Another type of report, this is great for sustainability managers, building summary that's looking at, all of your commodities. You can set targets down below of my EUI, what I want my target to be and how am I performing compared to target. We overlay weather data on here so you can get a snapshot of was my winter colder this year compared to last year or a base year. So a lot of good things on this report. So this is a great one to standardize on, where it's showing just a mix of a lot of different data. Again, Energy Star score, most recent, and then a mix of all my use and use per area and tracking towards targets. Another very valuable type of report is a year-to-year comparison. So in this case, I'm comparing 21 to 2020, and I'm looking at my CO2 equivalent. So how does my, if I'm doing carbon reduction strategies, how is it comparing 2021 compared to 2020? And I can see, am I down or am I up compared to 2020, my base year. But I could report on a different metric. It could be use per area or total cost. In this case, it's CO2. And then an executive summary, which is also very nice. So portfolio wide, how am I performing for each commodity? So what's my electric use, total like blended unit cost for all electric meters? What's my MMBTU? And what's my total cost? So just portfolio level, how are all commodities stacking up, this year, and what does that look like? So a lot of different views of data and ways that you can report and use it strategically. So I'm going to stop there, and hopefully we have time for a couple questions. So let me turn it over to Amber and see if she has some questions from the group.
Yeah, I'm fielding questions from the audience. So thank you everyone for submitting your questions. If we can't get to all of them, don't worry, we'll follow up with you. But John, I'm getting a lot of questions on emission factors, specifically custom emission factors for different locations, so city and state factors, and how does EnergyCAP handle that?
Yeah, great question, everyone. And I know that this was a topic from some of you that when I saw the registration, you can absolutely enter your own factors into the EnergyCAP database. For those of you that are longtime users, that capability is in one of our legacy versions. But if you need custom factors, we can enter it for you. A future release will let you enter your own factors. But if you need your own custom factors today, please submit a support ticket and we can load them for you. We'll need to get them from you, but we can enter them. So that capability does exist. And in a future release, we'll allow you the capability to control your own factors.
That's great. Another question here on how to forecast bills in EnergyCAP.
Yeah, so that's another great question. The forecasting capability, there's a couple ways to do it. So one of them is we have an accrual function. It's a module within EnergyCAP that allows you to create future bills based on historical bills. So, generally it's looking at calendarized, periods, and then saying, well, what periods do you need to forecast to? And then it'll create accrual bills. Now, typically an accrual is part of an accounting function, but it also within EnergyCAP can track your use. The other method is there's a budget worksheet that you can download and then work through just different scenarios to say, I want to forecast like what the next year looks like based on historical and changes in weather, changes in floor area, things like that. So check out help and look for budget worksheet, and that might be a good place to start.
Fantastic. I think we have time for one more question. How does EnergyCAP work with district energy systems?
Yeah, great question. So we work, we're really the market leader in what we call chargebacks. And what chargebacks do is they organize and help with district energy. So the idea of district energy is you have a plant, the plant distributes out, you're generating commodities at a plant and then generating or distributing that out to buildings on a campus or within a city. So what EnergyCAP can do is track first the generation activities. So what's the mix going in to generate whatever it is, steam, chilled water. So you have that piece of it. And then downstream, it can track sub-meter reads. It can track formulas. If you don't have a sub-meter, it can track bill splits. So percent splits based on floor area, whatever the formula needs to be. So it's tracking the downstream distribution, and then it can create monthly bills based on that. And you can apply a rate to the sub-meter read or what have you. The last step to that, it can actually track your generation and your downstream and track the line loss. And then from there, you can either say, great, that's my line loss, or you can redistribute the line loss cost back based on a proportion of all of the downstream meters. So a lot of functionality there for district energy.
That's great. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. We've got a list of more questions, but we'll follow up with each and every one of you. So thank you so much for your engagement and participation. Thank you, John, for pulling together this presentation. It was fantastic. For all of you on the call, we will be sending out a recording of this live webinar within the next 24 hours to all registrants. And if you have any further questions, please visit energycap.com, submit a contact us form, and ask your question. We'll be happy to follow up with you and chat with you. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and have a great day.
Bye.